And I also want to say we are trying to do a variety of trainings for protesters and activists across the country. And tomorrow at 6 p.m., we're going to be having another training. And this one is going to be more centered around how to plan an action or protest yourself. So that's a little bit about advocates. I'm going to pass it to Ria, who's going to get us started with the training.
Cool. Good evening, y'all. How are you all doing? You can't hear me, or you can't answer me, but I'm going to assume that everybody's doing well because it is Wednesday night and you've made the choice to come out and learn about how to resist in this current time and learn about your constitutionally protected rights to protest and find out more about how to be an advocate in the streets. So my name is Ria Thompson Washington. I am a member of the National Lawyers Guild. I also work during the day as National Democracy Manager at the Center for Popular Democracy. And so I'm always in the streets, and this is what I do for fun, right? So I am going to talk to you a little bit. The pronouns I use are she, hers. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat. I also put my contact information if you want to get connected and you happen to live in DC. I'd be happy to connect you with some groups that are doing jail support and legal observing and protester protection work in the street. So let's just get into it. So the first thing is that I want to share with you that what I'm about to tell you is legal information. I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm not representing anybody here on this call. Just a disclaimer to know, so if you end up in an interaction or altercation with the police, don't go tell anybody, Ria told me, because it's not going to help you. This information is something that you're going to use in the event that you have to provide or create a defense for any type of like criminal or civil action. So just take this information and use it wisely, but recognize that when it comes to interactions with police or when you're in the streets or just a regular interaction, even if it's a traffic stop, there are certain ways that you can try to avoid getting out of it, but you really can't talk your way out of being arrested. And so we're not even going to try. We're going to talk about ways to be smart in the street. So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do, right, to have this conversation is start with an analysis of power, right? So the state has the power and people need to claim it. I think we all see right now that we're in a movement where people are deciding and making a decision to reclaim our power, and that is taking to the streets to protest and generally redress the government with our issues, right? And that in this case is the killing of Black people and not valuing the not valuing of Black lives. So so like the power to resist and speak out is highly curtailed by the circumstances that you are and your vulnerability to the state. So it should be noted that when you're exercising your First Amendment rights to protest out in the streets, that someone who might be gender nonconforming or undocumented or a Black person or come from an oppressed group is going to have a far greater risk in different interaction with the state than perhaps like a cisgendered white person, right? And so historically we know that, and we have seen that the way that we make change is through collective action. We know this to be true because we see it happening right now where there's a national conversation about defunding the police and other abolitionist praxis when we've never even had we've never been at this moment. We're at a watershed moment where we're actually talking about how to change the world that we live in. So I want to talk to you about your basic constitutional rights when encountering the police. And just keep in mind, again, whether the police respect your rights is completely different because as we know, police lie and they will lie to protect themselves. So much is made of the First Amendment, but when we talk about what the First Amendment means and what rights are actually given, you know, things that we don't really consider is that the First Amendment really talks about what you can do, but there's only what you could do, excuse me, but there's only really one thing that it really grants you the absolute right to, right? It says Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free speech that exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the peace of people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Like when we take this statement as a whole, it seems like the First Amendment is being written to tell us what kind of rights we have access to. But what it's really telling us is that Congress cannot make any of these laws, they say, but we've seen it happen in action. We've seen the state make laws to outlaw people coming into the country depending on where they come from. We've seen the current administration take actions to limit the press and try to limit freedom of speech, and even harm people when they do take to the streets. And so that's why it's important to remember that the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for a redress of grievances is the most important part of this First Amendment. This is telling you exactly what you're doing when you're out in the streets, and as long as you remember that that's what you're, that's what you're there for, you are going to fare better off. But also, we know that police are going to interact with you in the way that they choose, right? And so the takeaway from this is that knowing your First Amendment right, knowing it, and knowing that you have the right to redress the government with your grievances or petition the government with your grievances, knowing that the First Amendment will not protect you in a police encounter. It is very important for you to remember that, because cops do not care about your First Amendment rights. The First Amendment is not, it's not the most ideal protection, right? But it's what we have when we try to protect ourselves when we're out in the streets. So, again, when we're examining how the relationship between the state and the people really like balances out, we know that the state doesn't care about Black people. So we're going to talk more about our hypothetical constitutional rights and the ways that we can combat state oppression and police interactions. And again, remembering that especially like during a time like this, like during the Pride Month, on the precipice of Juneteenth, that oppressed groups like Black people, women, trans, gender nonconforming folks, undocumented folks, always face the reality of state violence when attempting to invoke their rights. And the way that we show up for our comrades is by using our solidarity to show up in the streets and using our privilege to do that. So, I want to ask by a show of hands, if you think that law enforcement, if you think that a police officer has to actually tell you that they're a police officer, can you raise your hand? I'm just going to go to gallery view real quick. Can you raise your hand and put it in the camera, or use the little indication if you think that police officers have to tell you they have to tell you that they are in fact law enforcement? Okay, so I see quite a few raised hands. Cool. Yeah, and so I want to give you that the question is kind of rhetorical, right? Because here on the screen, I'm showing you that not only are police like King Pinocchios, but they are actually trained to lie. They're trained to trick you into talking to them, to get you to answer questions that you didn't intend to maybe have you accidentally snitch on something that you didn't mean to, and to unknowingly make you turn over evidence and offer information that you probably never even intended to share. So it's important to remember that the police system, as we know it, is not intended to help you. Police can be super harmful depending especially on your privilege. And when I say police, I mean literally every type of police. That's federal police, ICE, Homeland Security, Secret Service. I'm in DC, and we have 34 different types of police departments here, and I mean every single one of them, from school police to metro police, right? Private security, university cops, all of them. They're all doing the same thing, and that is with the intention of trying to get you to reveal things that you may not have wanted to. So let's talk about what happens, like what kind of interactions that you might have with the police officer. So generally, there are 3 interactions that you're going to have when you're encountering law enforcement, right? You're either in the conversation phase, you're in detention, or you're being arrested. Now, the language that you use while you're in these types, or the language that the police use in these interactions, are going to tell you what level you're at. So it's important to listen to what they're saying and talk as little as possible. The reason that you want to talk as little as possible is because you have nothing to say to the police. There's no question that they ask that you absolutely must answer. There's no reason that you have to be interacting with the police officer unless you are being detained or being arrested. And so let's talk about how we know what level we're at, right? So let's say conversation, right? A police officer approaches you, you're at a protest, or you happen to be just out in the world with your friends, you're doing whatever. A police officer approaches you and asks, excuse me, can I talk to you? Now, just like any other person who would come up to you on the street that you might not want to engage with, you absolutely have the right not to say anything. You do not have to speak to a police officer. Again, a police officer who has approached you and is just, they're trying to get information from you from whatever reason, you do not have to speak to them. So in the event that you are approached by a police officer that you do not want to have a conversation with, which should be every police officer, you're going to say, am I being detained or am I free to go? These are the key words that are gonna signify to the police officer that you recognize their intention to violate your rights, and that you are asserting your own right to not have to say anything to them and not to divulge any information. So again, if you're in the conversation portion, a police officer has approached you casually, excuse me, can I speak to you? Can I talk to you? Or stop for a moment. The first thing that you should ask is, are you detaining me? Am I free to go? Okay. Politely, but firmly. And here's the thing: you don't have to take off running. You don't have to do anything like that if you to put yourself in danger, because chances are, if you start running, a police officer is going to run after you, and that is whether you've done anything what they perceive to be wrong or not. So you are never required to speak to a police officer, but if you don't give your name when they ask you, that could turn a routine stop into an illegal arrest, right? And so that could escalate it for them. So when you're in an interaction with the conversation with the police officer, use your best sense about whether or not to answer the question, any questions that might be asked of you. Again, you do not have to, you are not required to, but if you don't give your name to a police officer, or if you give a fake name to a police officer and they discover that, that might escalate any interaction that you might have with them. Giving a fake name can be, in some jurisdictions, considered to be a crime. So if a police officer approaches you for a conversation, the best thing for you to do, no matter where you are, is to ask whether you're being detained. And if they answer you in the affirmative that you are not being detained, then it is in your best bet to go ahead and leave that space, okay? So let's say that the police officer says you are being detained. Now, in this case, the police officer has had to identify something that would be reasonable suspicion. They need something specific. And in this case, you are not able to leave, but they can only detain you as long as it takes to investigate their suspicion and collect any evidence against you. And so in that time means they're going to be trying to ask you questions. Again, as we talked about previously, You do not have to answer any questions by a police officer. Now, I know we see on TV that tells us, oh, the police officer is going to start to read you your Miranda rights and tell you that what you can say can be used against you in a court of law. That doesn't always happen on the streets. It almost never happens on the street. What happens is the police officer will continue talking to you and trying to extract information from you by casually asking you things, casually trying to search your person, casually trying to ask questions to ascertain what kind of wrongdoing they may assume that you might be doing, right? And so it's important that cops like recognize this also, and so they want to stay at the conversation level because later in court, if you don't ask certain questions to determine what stage you're in of conversation, if you're trying to defend yourself in court, they could be like, oh well, you know, this person was always free to go, they never left, they continued to talk to me, and they never had that opportunity. So when you are being detained, the officers are allowed to frisk you. They're allowed to conduct a pat down search where they can place their hands on the front of your body or over your clothing as an attempt to discern like whether you have any weapons. You can refuse consent to search. It doesn't mean that they're gonna respect your wishes, but it can mean that like any evidence that is found on you could be kept out of a criminal proceeding against you. Again, the police officers are not well versed in First Amendment rights. They don't know any more than any of us. They aren't educated in constitutional law. What they know is how to abuse power and authority. And so what you're trying to do is survive an interaction so that you can get to be able to defend yourself through whatever system you might need to. So trying to stop a police officer from searching your person might like lead to arrest and could lead to additional charges. So the best thing to do when a police officer is detaining you is to continue to remain to be silent and allow them to search you as they try to. Again, the best thing that you can say to a police officer is nothing at all. That is the safest language that you can use outside of asking some of these magic words that I'm going to be sharing with you. And so if you decide that you are not consenting to a search, use those words in plain language. I do not consent to a search. So the first thing you're going to say in the limited conversation you're having with the police officer is, am I being detained? Am I free to go? Yes, you're free to go. No, you're not being detained. You can walk away. Yes, you are being detained. No, you are not free to go. Fine. I do not consent to a search. Immediately after a police officer has determined that you're in custody, which is what happens when you're being detained, they're going to try to search you, and you at that moment should assert your right to not be searched. And then in the moment that you become under arrest for whatever reason, an officer has decided that they have reasonable suspicion to arrest you. Again, you're choosing to remain silent except for these magic words. And those magic words are going to be, I am going to remain silent. I want to see a lawyer. Now, the reason that these words are considered to be like magic words are because judges have drafted some language in court opinions that could help like during any of these like levels of interaction. So like they can protect your rights, they might protect your life in that moment. It is the hope that you asserting your rights and your knowledge at this moment will allow a police officer to recognize that you are well informed of your rights and hope that they would discontinue their abuse of you. That may not always happen. And so it's important for you all to make sure that you remember these very important words. So I'm going to say them again, and I want you to say them with me. Don't turn on your speaker because that would overwhelm the system and that would be too much. But just say that with me, like, I am being detained. Excuse me, am I being detained or am I free to go? I do not consent to a search. I am going to remain silent, and I want to see a lawyer. Now, let's talk about, searches. Now, if an officer is asking you for permission to search you, you have the right to say, I do not consent to a search. If they continue to search you, don't physically resist them. If you physically resist them, they might try to charge you with this resisting arrest. Instead, if you're at a protest and there's a legal observer nearby, try to get that officer's name and badge number. Be careful of the casual ways that they'll try to search you without your knowledge, like, oh, what's in your bag, or do you want to open your trunk, or what is that you're carrying, or how about showing me what's in your pockets. Cops are going to try to lie to you and get you to give them consent without your permission, because likely they don't have a reason to be able to search you, but they want you to give them consent to a search so that they can illegally search you with your permission. And when they do that, anything that they find can be used against you in that moment, or against to kind of commit you to any crimes. And so it's important also that to keep yourself safe. Like a lot of people keep their cell phones in their pockets or their bag or something close on their person. I know that it is all the rage to use biometric data, that is to open your phone with your thumbprint or your eye or your facial recognition. And I'm going to discourage and encourage everyone to use instead password protected cell phone passwords with at least 6 characters. This is because if you are at a protest, a police officer cannot perform an illegal search on you by confiscating your phone and using your biometric data against your will to be able to open your phone and access whatever is in there. And at this current time, it hasn't been decided by the Supreme Court whether or not that constitutes a reasonable search. And so it's in your best interest to try to protect yourself as much as you can, and password protect your phone. If you are ever at home and a police officer approaches your home and they are trying to gain entry to your home, you do not have to allow a police officer into your abode. What you can do is ask for a warrant, ask to see the warrant before you allow them to come in the home. That is, you're going to ask them to slide the warrant up to the door, or put it up to a window so that you can see it, read it carefully, make sure you see what information it allows them access to. And there are plenty of resources online. If you would like to see, if you would like more information, please hit me up in the chat and I'll get that to you. The National Lawyers Guild has Know Your Rights booklets that can help you with this information. And not for nothing, it's not technically a way to say, like, don't come to my house, but there are these like floor mats, or the welcome mats you can get to say come back with a warrant. And it hasn't been proven to work yet, but it hasn't been disproven yet either. So now let's say you've been at a protest and you're arrested. Now what do you do? Being arrested is incredibly traumatic, especially if you fall into any of the sensitive, like, population categories, right? So before engaging in any type of action or protest or anything, make sure that you do a couple things. You let people know where you're going to be. You let them know what's going to be happening. If you're participating in civil disobedience, you make sure that you have coordinated with the jail support team, that you have given your information so that if you do get arrested or when you are arrested, folks can follow up with you. And depending on what's happening, like the trauma that happens when you're arrested can be, you can go to a myriad of places. You can end up at a hospital first, or end up at a district first before you get to central cell. So just keep in mind that no matter what jurisdiction you live in, being arrested is going to be a traumatic experience at any cost. And we're going to try to make sure that you avoid it by taking some of the steps that we talked about earlier, right? Relying on those magic words. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? I do not consent to a search. I'm going to remain silent. I would like to speak to a lawyer. So after you've been arrested, you can choose not to talk to anyone other than the lawyer and about the circumstances of your arrest. It's important for you not even to talk to other prisoners, friends, or family. If you're in with a group of people and you've all been arrested together as part of an action, don't talk about details of the action. Don't talk about what happened, who is where, and what happened when. Because there's likely undercover police also who have infiltrated with you, and you don't want to share that information or share anything that you don't need to. Instead, sing freedom songs, chant, comfort each other, make sure that people are safe, advocate for each other, make sure that people have what they need. And most of the time, if you're arrested, depending on the jurisdiction, here in DC, we have what they call post and forfeit, where you essentially pay $50 and for a fine, and you can get out. You're not held for long. You just get a citation. Other jurisdictions don't have that. Sometimes you have to pay bail, or it can vary depending, but you should know that before you go out into protest. Also, it's important to note that if you're not able to afford an attorney, that the court must appoint one. The catch with that is that it also has all kinds of limits, like depending on your income, depending on like what how much access you have to resources as to whether or not you can get that type of support. And so just be mindful with your information and try to keep it safe. So the Fifth Amendment, AKA why you should never talk to cops. Remember, police officers are trained to try to get you to disclose information about yourself. Like, even if you think you're the most law-abiding citizen, keep in mind that there are over 5,000 federal crimes and over 300,000 regulations that can be enforced criminally, and they increase every day when Congress is working right. And so, on average, Congress can create up to like one new criminal law once a week, every year. And that's just on the federal level. So it's in your best interest to not talk to the police. And there's a reason why. It's because you can't talk yourself out of being arrested. Any information that you give to the police cannot be used to exonerate you later. What you tell the police can only be used against you. If you are guilty of something, even if you aren't, you might admit your guilt without getting anything in return. And again, police have been trained to get confessions out of people, including false confessions. We know, we've seen when they see us, we know the way that they treat certain demographic groups to try to extract information and make people lie on themselves. Thousands of people falsely confess to crimes after being manipulated by police. So even if you think you haven't broken any laws, it's a crime to lie to police. And so the longer you're talking to them, the more likely it is that you're going to eventually tell a lie or say something that they believe to be a lie, or say something contradictory, or anything that they can misconstrue into an argument that you'd lied to them. And again, remember, police lie. We know police lie because we just watched police accuse Shake Shack of poisoning them. We know police lie because we've seen police kill people in cold blood time after time after time after time, and allege that they are the ones who are in fear despite being the people with guns. So it's important that you just are mindful of what you say. So say less, say the least that you actually can say. Every piece of information, even information that's totally exculpatory, like an alibi, could incriminate you if the police can find any evidence, even if they can find, anything that's not related on you. They'll try to expose you in any way they can. So again, as I mentioned, a lot of people are going to be protesting in DC this weekend. If you happen to be one of them, we generally tell people to keep $50 on you, so that in the event that you do get arrested while protesting, you can get a post and forfeit, which is amounts to the resolution of a criminal charge. It's not a conviction of a crime, and it's not equated to a criminal conviction, but you pay $50 to get a ticket. Now, let's talk about some special considerations for folks who we need to take care of when we're out on the streets, right? Folks who are non-citizens, do not speak to any police officers, members of law enforcement agencies. That includes the FBI, CIA, DEA, park police. Even they're, often dressed like police officers or regular people. Don't talk to anyone. No one, if anyone asks about your immigration status, or if you happen to be with the person who is undocumented, you can use your privilege to help protect them. So if anybody asks about their immigration status, automatically, I would like to speak to an attorney. Always have a buddy with you in case the police officer doesn't give you an opportunity to make that call. Make sure that you give your partner, or whomever your buddy is, the number of your legal team. So if you're undocumented and you're going out to protest, make sure that people know, have your information, so in the event that you get arrested, you can be checked on, and folks can make sure that you're also okay, and make sure that the buddy knows like where you were arrested, the type of officer that arrested you, and what station or jail you're being taken to. And they should have a copy of your passport with your picture, birth date, and a copy of your visa if you have one. But again, you do not have to reveal your immigration status to any government official. You should know your immigration number if you have one. And if you need more resources about that, I'm happy to direct you to our National Immigration Project for the National Lawyers Guild. Additionally, you can also have the right to call your consulate or family. So, but again, that is at the discretion of the police, and we know police don't always do what we consider to be the right thing. Other people we want to look out for, special considerations for gender nonconforming and transgender and gender nonconforming people. The reason that we need to look out for them is because oftentimes we know that police does not respect the designations, or excuse me, they do respect the designations on government IDs, and so someone ID may not necessarily match or reflect their gender identity. And so without that, people can be placed in harms. They can be placed in spaces. For example, a trans woman might be housed with men, or they may be placed in isolation alone. And often, folks can be a target of abuse by other prisoners as well as law enforcement. So it's important that we stand in solidarity with our transgender and gender nonconforming family, because solidarity is a valuable tool that we use to protect people who could be targeted or abused. One option is to ask to have a member or an officer from the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender liaison unit. Most police departments have one now, and so try to get that support. And also, it is also should be noted that federal and state jails are supposed to do a case-by-case analysis under the Prison Rape Elimination Act to determine the person's risk for sexual victimization or abuse. So this often leads to transgender folks being put in isolation because officials will assert that they can't be placed in either male or female housing because of concern for other inmates. So again, it's important for us to stand in our privilege and use our solidarity to support our comrades. Also, other considerations for folks who are differently abled or who may have medical conditions. The American with Disabilities Act does make it illegal to discriminate against people with disabilities, including by law enforcement. However, it is certainly not known for people with disabilities to be singled out and targeted by the police. It is not unknown. As a matter of fact, in DC last year, there was a protest of people who were all in wheelchairs. And I distinctly remember the images of Capitol Police handcuffing a number of people together who were all in wheelchairs to cart them off to being arrested. So it's important for folks that have certain privileges to use our affinity, our groups, friends, and jail support to let folks know if there's any disabilities to be thoughtful of or mindful of that could make the situation worse during or after your arrest. And it's all like there should be a discussion during the action about how to come up with strategies. All like what our intent should always be to be inclusive. So we should have spaces where we can take care of folks. So like if you're at a protest, there needs to be mobility access spaces for folks who can't maybe march the whole time at a protest, or different accommodations. So when people need medication, the best idea is to keep a couple of days worth of medication just in case that you are arrested, you have your medication, make sure that it's labeled, and so that you can have access to it, because you don't want to be in a situation where you've been arrested and you have anti-anxiety meds, or you have something that you need and you don't have access to it, and the police and the officers are not going to try to make sure that you have access to it. So even though they should, but when you are reached out to by the legal team or the jail support team, immediately let them know that you are in need of medications, and we will, your jail support team should do everything that they can to get that to you. If you don't want to use your name, you can always give, keep a copy of a recently dated doctor's letter that explains what you need with you, or a picture of you and a doctor's letter signed, so that you can use that to kind of protect yourself. And so lastly, or as we're rounding out, it's important to think about how minors show up at a protest. I know that we're at a time when a lot of the actions that we're seeing around the country are largely youth-led, and that's fantastic and that's phenomenal. But police also don't care about the lives of young Black and Brown children. We've seen how they will treat what they consider to be grown adult male children, like Tamir Rice, about how they will kill children indiscriminately in the streets. And so when someone looks 18 or looks under 18, they still have the opportunity to be arrested. They can be processed as a juvenile. If there are no parents or guardians around, it can sometimes take a long time to identify a child, because they may be traumatized and not want to speak. And so if you're at an action with people who are younger or under 18, considered minors, please take good care. Make sure that their parents or guardians know where they are. Make sure to watch for them, and make sure that you, like, when things start to accelerate, you take that into consideration about how to proceed, whether you're going to stay at a protest or not. And please be advised that minors are generally not released if they are arrested, except into the custody of an adult. And so, again, be mindful of how you're protecting the people you're showing up with, and that includes children. So I wanted to talk about a couple of different potential charges. So these charges are not specific only to DC, but there will be hundreds of thousands of people who emerge on DC this weekend, and planning for the Juneteenth activities. And so you should know what type of charges are out there, right? And that is assault on a police officer, unlawful entry, blocking a passage, like if you and your comrades are blocking the entryway or trying to keep people out using your body, crossing a police line, failure to obey, private home protests. For example, if you're protesting at somebody's home or in their neighborhood, that can be its own special set of charges. And then if you're on federal property, like if you're at the state capitol of your state, or if you are in federal buildings, or you're doing protests at like even Confederate monuments, or like like the White House, for example, or the Supreme Court or national parks, it's important to know that each of those places, locations, come with their own special set of challenges that can ratchet up what you can be arrested for. And it's important before you go out in the street to know what the most likely charges are in the jurisdiction that you live in, so that you can best prepare yourself to be ready for that. And then if you're not completely terrified to go into the streets after hearing about the ways in which police and interactions with police can go quickly left, from protests to just personally just walking through the street, we have to remember that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. The reason that we do this work, the reason that we get out in the streets, is because it is critical for us to show solidarity and support in fighting for racial justice. The only way that we will ever achieve anything is through collective action. And so that is to use what we can do together, and that is collectively support each other through our privilege and affinity, to be able to make this change, this moment, this resistance stick and happen. So I hope you have gotten information from this training, and remember the 3 magic phrases. If you remember nothing else, please remember, when you're out in the streets, if you're interacting with a police officer: am I being detained? Am I free to go? I do not consent to a search, and I am going to remain silent. I would like to speak to a lawyer, and then remain silent. Okay. Again, I'll drop my information back in the chat for those of y'all who didn't get it the first time. Have any questions? No matter where you live in the United States, I probably know a lawyer or somebody who's doing legal support work in that state, and I can connect you with somebody. So feel free to hit me up, and let's make the work grow. Thanks.
Thank you so much. This was really helpful. We had a couple of questions in the chat, and I was keeping track of them. If you are able to, either the facilitators.
Let's do it, for sure.
Yeah, so the first question I see is, if you are being mistreated during being arrested, would it be smart to verbalize what's occurring in case it's being video recorded, or will that escalate things?
So that's a really great question. If there's a legal observer, or you're you have crew or friends with you who are recording what's happening, it is important for you to articulate what's happening at every step, because you are essentially going to be narrating what is happening to you, what you're experiencing. And as we've seen specifically most recently with the death of George Floyd, the narration of his death by himself is what has had the most impact, right? And so we know generally we want to be mindful of how we record when we're in protest situations, or even in interactions with police, because you might record yourself or incriminate yourself accidentally, right? But that said, if you're going to be recording or recording somebody, get every single thing you can. Get the badge number, get the number of the police car, get the street where you are. Literally get as much information as possible so that you can protect your comrade or yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then the next question is, so I know you said to say that you don't consent to search, but if you ask questions, like if they are searching you and they ask you questions about things while the search is occurring, if you've already said you don't consent to being searched, do you have to answer the questions about what they're finding?
Absolutely not. Again, you do not have to say anything. The more you talk, the more likely you are to talk yourself into being arrested or harmed in some way in that interaction. So if you have said, I do not consent to a search, and a police officer is taking it upon themselves to search you anyway, do not say anything about anything that they find on your person, because they absolutely will use whatever you said against you in trying to prosecute you criminally. So do not say anything. Remain at that point, I would say, I would like to speak to a lawyer, and I'm choosing to remain silent, I would like to speak to a lawyer, in either order. But those phrases need to be articulated so that you know that you've asserted that right, and hopefully that will make the police officer. Nothing's going to make a police officer do right, because we don't need them and they're wrong to begin with. That said, we hope to influence their behavior by being better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you are being detained, do you still have the right to videotape the interactions?
So the thing is that you do have the right to videotape the interactions, and you should hope that the police officer is wearing their body cam. The problem is that because police officers aren't trained in de-escalation, they're trained to escalate situations. Any move, anything that you do that can be perceived as not listening to them. I mean, there's literal statutes in most cities and most jurisdictions that talk about what assault on a police officer is. For example, in DC, assault on a police officer includes not listening to their orders. So just not listening to a police officer telling you to do something specific is assault, because they're super fragile, right? And despite the fact that they have guns and they run around killing people, if you don't listen to them, that makes them come unhinged. And so it is in your, like, our goal in this is to stay alive. If you're alive, you can fight whatever happens. If you're not alive, we're going to be out in the streets for you, right? So do your best bet to get out of the situation alive, to make it to the other side, assert your rights, assert your privilege, say the things that you need to say, but also recognize that it may not save your life. It may not keep you from getting harmed by the police. You may get, beat up by the police, but you're protecting yourself for your defense. And that's what we're trying to do, is prepare you to defend yourself.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This is really helpful. And another question that I saw was, what considerations should someone that has previously been incarcerated or arrested take?
That's a great question, and that's a really important question. So the thing is that we know our own histories, right? And so when you have a record already, or you have a history or a past, know that because the carceral system that we live in is never going to forgive you for anything that you've done ever, and there's not actually a process through which you can rehabilitate yourself through the lens of the carceral state that we live in. And I'm talking, this is like my abolitionist talk now, right? So I can go off for hours, but I'm saying all of that to say that be mindful of what you are carrying with you. If you have warrants out for your arrest, you probably don't need to be at the protest. Not because we don't need your body there, but because we don't need you to put yourself in a space where you're going to end up in more harm. If you have had prior convictions or charges, even if they were dropped, that makes police deal with you differently, right? So the moment that they run your fingerprints or run your information, they're going to come back and handle you differently. And so just be mindful of the ways that you put yourself at harm, and do your best to try to stay out of the reach of police officers if you at all can. Now, I'm not telling anybody not to go put yourself out on the street. I'm just saying, be safe. And if you're going to do that, maybe you're not somebody who can do civil disobedience. Maybe you can't be a legal observer. Maybe you just need to be out there as a protester who's on a green level, where the moment they're given an order to disperse, you leave. You're not staying for the turn up or for the battle or for the fight, for any of that. You're out because you know your circumstance. And at the end of the day, we want you safe, and we want you back at home.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been really helpful, Ria. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with everyone.
And we'll have one last question. Yeah. Somebody asked, what is a legal observer? And I just wanted to share that a legal observer is a national program that the National Lawyers Guild runs, and we work with a bunch of different organizations and jurisdictions throughout the country. And what we do, we observe the actions of police at protests, and that is to make sure that the police are not going wild and just recklessly beating on people, tear gassing. We do all of these capturing and documenting of what is happening. So in the event that litigation or policy or anything comes of it that needs to be addressed, there is live real-time proof from objective folks about what happened. That said, we don't support Nazis and we don't defend any type of hate groups. So that's what a legal observer is. And I will drop my information again in the chat. And if you have any questions, Twitter is the best way to catch me.
Great, thank you so much. And for everyone, just to know, we're going to have some more questions at the very end. We have a second facilitator. So I've seen people's questions in the chat. Keep on posting questions in the chat and we're keeping track of them. But we're going to move to our second facilitator, Breya, who's going to be talking a little bit more about jail support and like what to do if yourself or others are arrested. But thank you so much, Ria. This was extremely helpful. And yeah, feel free to keep writing questions in the chat, folks. Thank you for your engagement. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay. All right. All right. Oh, you're muted. Okay, sorry. 1 second. All right, unmute. Hello.
Oh, hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Breya Johnson. I am the education co-chair over at BYP 100, the DC chapter. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we are the Black Youth Project 100. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
Sure. Okay. So today we're talking about jail support, but like I said, we're BYP 100. We were founded in 2013. We're a member-based organization for Black youth activists, creating justice and freedom for all Black people. We're a national and member-based organization, so you have to be Black and ages 18 to 35 to join us. We are also an abolitionist organization. We do organizing, advocacy, political education, and we organize through a Black queer feminist lens. So one of the most important things that I want you all to know about doing jail support is that it's all about community. Jail is a lot, what we know about the criminal punishment system is that they really rely on you being isolated. They rely on you not having a home. They rely on you being alone. So they really do exploit that. So when we give jail support, we're also telling one of our comrades, one of our community members that they're not alone, but we're also showing the criminal punishment system that they're not alone. And so that is what we hope kind of deters them from keeping you there longer than they really should be to try to punish you, because it is the criminal punishment system, and then just thinking they can get to you whenever they want to. Like, jail support is also to show a sense of urgency that we want our person home right now. So some quick tips when you're protesting and you get arrested. Also, just let me say that I'm speaking to you all as an organizer, as someone who has been arrested, and as someone who has done jail support. So this is just a facilitation based on basically personal experience as well. So some quick tips when you're protesting. protesters, the people who organize a protest, usually already have a jail support number. They've usually already coordinated with legal observers or lawyers who are willing to offer their services. That's usually when a good protest is planned. So when you arrive, you are usually given a jail support number. That number is really, really, really important. You should write that number on your body. And if you can, you should give that number to whoever is your buddy. So I always write the number on my arm underneath my sleeve, just somewhere where it's not 100% noticeable to the cops right away. And also it's protected from being washed away just in case it rains or anything like that. So remember to always write the number on your body. 2, like the previous facilitator said, you can ask why you've been arrested, but you shouldn't say anything else. And then 3, when you get to the jail and you're able to make your first and one and only phone call, we highly recommend that you call the jail support number as opposed to first calling a family member. And that's really hard for a lot of people because when you're in trouble, you know, your first thought is to call someone in your family, to call a friend. Like that's what we usually think, but our family and our friends may not be equipped to fully help us. So it's really best to call the jail support number first, and then you can give them your full legal name, your emergency contact, your location, and the reason the police gave for arresting you. I also want to add that if you do have any previous warrants or anything else, sometimes it's good to let them know that as well, because you don't want people to show up thinking they're getting you out of jail for a protest, but then it turns out that the police have added some charges to you. So those are the first 3 kind of quick tips I'm going to give you all. So I mentioned the buddy system. That's really, really, really important. We don't recommend protesting alone at all. We understand that sometimes people may not have family or friends and they still want to get involved, but we really don't recommend protesting without some type of buddy system. So what I mean by that is before you go to a protest, you should pick at least one person. This can be a family member. This can be somebody on Twitter. This can be somebody in your political home. This can be a friend. But somebody should know when you arrive at a protest and when you expect to get back home. And they should know if they don't get a text message from you by 1 a.m., that likely means that you are arrested. 2, if you do not have somebody at home that can do that for you, we recommend having a card on you. On this card, you can put your legal name, you can put your medical needs, and you can put an emergency contact on there. When you are arrested, sometimes we have people who drop the card on the floor and they alert the next person to pick that up for them, and they rely on the buddy system in that way. And then sometimes you may be at the protest with your friend and you can quickly give the card to them so that they know who to call as well. What we recommend is that if you are someone's buddy, always, always, always try to get in contact with the people who organized the protests so that you can find out what their jail support number is. Next slide. 2, okay, so when you're doing jail support, you have to be prepared to wait a really, really long time. Most of the time, it's just because of bureaucratic nonsense, but then a lot of the times it could be because there was a high number of people arrested. So we recommend doing jail support in shifts. So if you're doing this with an organization or you're doing this with just your group of friends, we recommend having people who go up there every few hours or who can take over for you in 4 or 5 hours, whatever you're comfortable with. But most likely you're gonna have to return to the jail. Usually it's been, in my cases of doing jail support, it's very rare that someone was released right when I got up there. It usually takes for me about 2 shifts. And that's like the relatively what's considered peaceful protests. When things are beyond that, it takes a lot longer. Always bring food, always bring lots of water, and always have your devices charged, and always turn off your fingerprint and your face ID always, just in case. Another important thing to understand is that when you go up to the jail, you do not say more than you have to. You just say that person's name. You say that they were arrested at this date and time, and you ask when they are being released and that they can be released to you. That's very important. Do not tell on yourself. Do not tell on someone else. That's very, very important. Next slide. Yes. So again, jail support comes back to showing that a person has community. So if it's related to a protest or if this person was just arrested, one really helpful thing you can do is to create a folder for them, a folder about kind of their life, who they're in community with, where they work, where they go to church, this and that, something to show that that person is not alone can be helpful for more of a long-term effort when you're doing jail support. But you really have to start thinking, what does it mean to show up collectively? What does it mean to show up as a community? And what does it mean to make sure that the police understand that this person is not alone, that they cannot just be disposed of and nobody will notice? That's really a key thing that you have to remember when you're doing jail support, because that's usually what the police are going to use against the person. Another thing is when people do come home, it's really helpful when there is somewhat of a crowd to greet them, but also some people have different needs and sometimes they're able to tell you that over the phone. It really does vary. But again, it matters that this person is in community. It matters that we are tracking our people. So figuring out who's claiming that they didn't make it home, that their friend didn't make it home, figuring out which people in your political home didn't make it home, and then constantly calling to check in on their bail hearing, their arrangement, and being outside to provide comfort for them. That's what jail support looks like in a nutshell. So you can have in-person shifts and then you can have phone shifts. The in-person shifts are the people who are going to actually go up to the jail, and they're there to greet people upon their release. They're there to ask upfront questions at the desk. And then you have people who can take phone shifts. The people who are taking phone shifts are calling to check to see if that person is where that person actually is, because the police lie. And sometimes you will think someone is at one jail when there's someone else. So you always want to keep calling and calling. Second, you want to ask questions to figure out, are they actually charged with anything yet? Do they need bail? That's really important. Also, sometimes there are separate people there are people who are coordinating jail support, and then there are people who are coordinating bail funds. Those people are not always the same people, so you need to figure out what it looks like to merge communication between those people, and you have to know if the jail that this person is even in even accepts bail. But that's important as well. If it's a good protest, they will have a bail fund and that information handy and dandy when you contact them, or they'll be able to reimburse you. But we know that that's not always the case. So we have to be prepared for these barriers when we sign up to do jail support. You can go to the next slide. Yes, so to give a personal experience, I think the first and only time I was arrested at a protest, it was them claiming I was jaywalking, but the entire protest was in the street. So just to give you all context, that when you're protesting, the police will find any reason to arrest you. They can make it up, or it can be something small that was okay yesterday, but it's not okay today. But what happens is that they come forward to you and they say, they confront you. I asked, what did I do wrong? They said, you were jaywalking. I said, am I being arrested? They say yes. So it was about over 100 of us maybe that got arrested that day. I had the jail support number on my arm, but at that time I didn't use it. I just called my mom. So that really kind of delayed the situation, because she was trying to call herself and do everything herself, but the people who I was with didn't even know where I was. So again, that's why I always recommend calling the jail support number and the people who are kind of trained to do this. before you contact a random person in your family, because it can really lead to you being there a lot longer. But some people are going to call their parent or their partner before anything, and I understand that. Give them the jail support number is what I always say. That's just really, really critical. Also, I want to encourage you all to understand that anybody can do jail support. Anybody. You don't have to be a lawyer. You just have to be physically and mentally able to handle something like this. It's something that requires a lot of care. It's something that requires a lot of love. And it's something that requires a lot of time. And police officers are absolute assholes. So they will be rude to you. They will do everything they can to deter you. They will find any reason to send you away. And you have to be mentally able to just keep coming back and back and back. And so that part can really be hard. But what you don't want to do, you don't want to kind of lose yourself and then you can't get back in the jail, or like they won't even look at you again because, you know, they think you're just nothing but a rebel rouser. And then the person ends up being in there longer than expected. So just remembering that it just takes a lot of mental stability to be able to provide someone with jail support. And that's the context I'm speaking in when you're doing it as an organizer. And I think that that's really, really important. So basically, the way the jail crew behaves and interacts with law enforcement at the precinct can really just affect how long your people are there. So just remember that when you go up there, they will find any reason to further punish the person that's actually in the jail. So remember that. I think, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I have a couple questions that I've been keeping track of in the chat. So one is, what if you don't have your phone or a phone number and you're arrested? What is a good way to track someone or put out a call so someone can find you?
If you do not have your phone and you are arrested?
Yes, like you don't have a phone number to call and you're arrested.
Oh, you don't have a jail fund to call?
Yes.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. So at that point, you would have to call a friend or a family member, or you might have to wait it out until they finally release you, because at some point, if they don't charge you with anything, they do have to release you. But at that point, call a friend or a family member. You give them your legal name, the charges that the police said or what they arrested you for, and then you tell them exactly where you are, the date and the time that you were arrested, and then immediately that person needs to start arranging shifts to come and get you, like an immediate response. I think the moment the police get a whiff of the fact that you might be isolated and the fact that somebody might just let you sit in there for a week and not say anything to them, it exacerbates your time in jail. So again, you want to call somebody and you want them to gather up. I do recognize that not everybody has like a full circle or a big family, and this could be difficult for people, which is why we try to put out acts for jail support on social media. But it's really important to try to go up there as quickly as you can. And also always look up the rules and see what that particular precinct does and what their requirements are.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And do the people doing jail support need to provide their legal name when picking someone up or asking about someone arrested?
I have never had to give my legal name when picking someone up from jail, but I would not be surprised if the cops did ask for someone's ID. So what I say is that if you are someone and your status is precarious, you may not want to be there at all, but I've never had to give my legal name.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much. And what tips do you have on like sustainable or longer term jail support? What structures, like consideration for time? Just like what tips do you have to like make this sustainable if like you're supporting someone for a longer period of time?
Yeah, if you're supporting someone for a longer period of time, that's usually when I recommend the building of a folder and like a community kind of profile for them to show that they're in community. For that, sometimes when it takes longer, the less amount of people that are going to go up each day. So that might be one person doing longer shifts. And then you just want to also find out if they have any other charges to figure out why it's taking so long. Because usually for protests, that's usually unusual. Now, I've had really long jail support for someone for supporting like sex workers, and they were being harassed by the police, and it was like a consistent arresting of this person. That's usually something that takes a lot longer. But when it comes to protests, usually one solid 3 to 5 people in a group and shifting it out usually works for us at where I am.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much. And another question I see is, who do you call at the jails? What do you do if the precinct won't share information?
If they won't share information, yeah, that's really, really, really hard. So you're asking, who do you call when you don't have a jail support number?
I think, sorry, I'm just reading a question someone else wrote.
Kinjo, happy. Sorry, I was chatting down all of the questions. The question is, if you are doing jail support on a phone, like you're calling the precinct and trying to get updates, and they won't answer questions or provide information about the person that is being held, what should you do in that instance?
Oh yeah, so that happens all the time. We usually continue to just document that on our end, and then we try to find alternative ways to confirm that that person is here. Usually that looks like trying to get in contact with their family, because most people will call a family member first, but we didn't try to find just the confirmation of where that person is. But most of the time when multiple people are calling, it gets to a point where the police won't give us information at all. That's okay. We keep agitating as organizers and as abolitionists. We keep agitating, and if we think that person is there, we keep calling and saying their name. But Ria, if you would like to jump in, you can.
Yeah. So
agitate.
what we do too is so before, it depends. Like Breya was saying, that before an action, like if the organizers have worked out, they know that people are going to be arrested and have collected information, it makes it easier, like, to have somebody fill out a form, a jail support form, like, this is your name, these are your people to contact if you're arrested, or if you're in jail for longer than this time, like all of that, right? So what we'll do on the jail support line is, when we get a call in and somebody's saying, hi, I've been arrested, we go through the information, we put all their information in a sheet, get like as much as we can, and then we call the precinct and find out when we can have somebody come do a jail visit with them, either in person, or right now it's virtual because of COVID. And so we have somebody who can do the jail support visit and like talk with that person, make sure that they're okay. But we will continue to call back to back. We will tie up
We
the
agitate
until they let us know.
Yes.
And they do that as a tactic, right? Because they want you to be worried about somebody. They're trying to discourage you. So like we know that police are going to do all of the mess in the world. So it's important that we continue to stick to our guns. And so we do that with a group of people. Like we'll all just sit there and keep calling every single precinct till we find somebody.
Yes, you keep calling. And I'll also thank you for bringing up the COVID point, because that is kind of being used against us now.
Yeah.
They're trying not to let us go up there.
Yeah.
But you have to, again, it goes back to my piece about this person is in community. And we have to assert that at every single point, because what we know about the criminal punishment system, we know that jail is nothing but punishment. We know it's to break the person and it's to break their families. And we know eventually they want you to say you did something you didn't even do, just because that space has brought you down that low. And what we're trying to do is, one, we're trying to do the opposite and say, you're not going to break that person. You're not going to break those people. We're going to keep agitating you. And for the police officers, it's going to get to a point where it's like, do I want these 30 people calling me every goddamn day for this one little sucker who jaywalked? Can I just let this one go?
No. And you know what? That's the other thing, Breya. I was thinking about, how in the time of the protests, like we're seeing now, like I recall, I believe it was in New Orleans, or somewhere else in the South, that there was a person who was being arrested, and the crowd surrounded the vehicle of the car, right? And like the crowd started singing protest songs until they released this young person from the police vehicle. And like, we have that power to make it happen. We have the power to like decide what happens, but it takes us acting collectively in defense of every single other person. So it's like, you could get out there, like we could make this happen, we could change this world, but we have to decide to do it.
That's why I do not recommend just getting up one day and just going to a protest.
Absolutely not.
I don't recommend it. You need community, you need collectivism, you need everybody to know I was here this date, this is where I was, and I'm supposed to get home safely, and if I don't, they did it. They absolutely did it. One thing that with some of my friends who are have more vulnerable identities, sometimes when they call us or they call the jail support number, they'll have to say, and my mental health is completely stable right now. If something happens to me, I did not kill myself. You have to assert that as well. And if you know their medical conditions, when you go up there and when you call, you say, I know that my friend is diabetic. I know that she brought her insulin with her to that protest. Like, these are things you kind of got to remind the police of, or they will try to plague you. And that's not even to say that it's going to work, unfortunately, because the criminal punishment system. But the more we narrate, the more we document, and the more we say is just important.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is really, really helpful. Okay, I see another question. If you're arrested with a friend or partner, is it best to avoid making it clear to the police that you know each other, or is it okay to comfort each other? I.e., are they more likely to try and separate you if they know that you are together?
So it depends on how many people are arrested and like what the facility that you're going to actually looks like. Sometimes you'll just end up being together. Sometimes they will isolate you. I would say, and Ria might disagree, I would say it's okay if they know that y'all know each other, because again, that means that person is kind of bearing witness and has a stake in your survival and their own survival as well. But there are situations where that could go wrong. But I've never, in my personal experience, had someone like be really adamant about not acknowledging each other. So yeah,
I would say that it just depends on the situation, right? Like if you're being arrested as part of an action, like you and a group of people, 100, 300 people are doing a civil disobedience or a civil disobedient action or whatever, and you have intimate knowledge of the details of what's happened and how it was planned. If you're arrested together, ideally you shouldn't be talking about any of what happened out in the streets, before the streets, what you're gonna do afterwards, names, none of that. You shouldn't be saying any of those things. If you can be arrested with somebody and spend that time singing protest songs, chanting, staying grounded in liberation and movement and staying present, then it's fine to be arrested with your homie. It makes it easier even, right? As long as y'all remember that what you're doing is not just about you in your present moment. It is about the movement, and anything that you say can put your comrades in jeopardy. And that's what you want to avoid, right? You don't want to put not just yourself, but other people who are depending on you for this movement, for the work that you're doing at jeopardy.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Just no matter what, just shut up.
Yes.
That's the best advice. Just shut up is the best advice I can give you. There's no profound way to say it. You gotta just shut up. And yeah, I love when they arrest us in the hundreds and 200 number, because then we could sing inside the jails and really aggravate them, and it might speed them letting us go up. They really can't stand that. But that's when it's high numbers. Don't try to do that when it's just like you and one other person.
Right.
then it's not really going to work out. But ultimately, yeah, if you want to do jail support, like I said, anybody can do it. It takes community. Do it in shifts. Be mentally prepared for it, and just know that it's an act of love to show up and get your people out of isolation.
Yes, thank you. Okay, one more question. How can you find out which jail someone else is being taken to if they are arrested?
In my experience, they told us, but it took like 22 different phone calls. It took being up there for a really long time. Like, Ria, you may disagree, but for me, I've never gotten anything easily out of no cop. So it really does take, where are they? They not here. Sometimes I've had to lie and be like, no, we got a phone call. They said they're not here. Like, it sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But like, it takes agitation because they really won't tell you. They will let you sit up at the county jail, and that person was transferred yesterday, and they know it. So you have to be prepared for that. I think the only people who are really overwhelmed by that are people who actually had faith in them in the first place, like the good faith folks.
There's some good apples out there.
Yeah.
I actually agree with you that police officers are liars, cops are liars, feds are liars, and because they are trained to lie, and not only are they trained to lie, but they're constitutionally protected by Supreme Court decision after circuit court decision after all of these things. They have qualified immunity, which means just based on the fact that they're police officers, they are given deference. Their opinion is given deference over anybody else. And so to that end, when we know that they are a part of a system that is built on white supremacy and is intentionally trying to remove a specific group of people from the population, and when we know that the people who are at the forefront of putting people in that population are liars, there's no way that we can trust any part of the system. So they're going to lie about where people are going. They're going to lie about whether they're in custody. They're going to lie about what time they'll be released, because it's all up to them. And it's so like, they just get to make it up however they want. And so no, you can't trust it. If they tell you something, don't trust it. Verify. You have to know better than them, but you have to continue to harangue them to get that information, and don't feel bad about it, because they're they're cops. Sorry, I'm trying not to curse, but they're cops.
And on on the practical level, what that also means is don't think you're about to get your mans out of jail before your work shift. Take off or don't do it.
Right.
That's I always try to get that in people's head. It's not, okay, I'm about to just go on drive and pick them up real quick. No, you're not. So just know that's an all-day activity. And if it wasn't an all-day activity for you, you got lucky.
Yes.
Got lucky that day.
Really.
Yeah. Some people seem to want to know how to get plugged in and volunteer to do jail support. So I see someone ask, if there isn't already an organization or structure to do jail support in our city, how can we go about doing jail support? And then I think someone else had asked how to find a jail support group to volunteer with.
That's a good question.
They're everywhere. So I dropped in the chat a list from National Lawyers Guild resources of jail supports that we have up and running around the country. So that's in all of generally major cities and on the coasts, right? Not as much in the South and in the Southwest, where we really need those resources, because we haven't gotten to that level of organizing yet there, but we're going to get there. That said, so you can generally find one from that list, or know somebody who knows somebody. Also, if you send me a message, hit me up on Twitter, I'll connect you with somebody. This is what I do for fun. This is my my free time, my non-paid work time, much to my wife's chagrin. So please, just ask, like, use your resources. You just met 2 resources here, so use them so that we can point you in the direction where you need to go. And if we can't find it, then we can help you set it up, because what you don't have right now in your community, it means it's waiting on you to build.
Yes,
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think on like the small scale, it could just be doing it for who you're in community with and starting small, starting in your own network and saying, hey, y'all, this person was arrested. I really care. We got to kind of get them out. And then you start with just 5 people, or you start with just 3 people, and you show support that way. That could be really, really helpful. If you see somebody on Twitter tweeted, my friend got arrested, I don't know what to do, you know, the buddy-to-buddy system, help them out, and you all can strategize and use these tips on what to do. So you can start small is what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. And a little bit more, can you share a little bit more about for minors being arrested? So I know you said that they would be like, they would have to be released to someone if they are a minor. Can they be released to any adult who's like waiting there for them, or does that person have to be their legal guardian?
You know, it depends on the jurisdiction. Because if, like, say a minor is with a group and that group has like a permission slip, right? Like something from the parent signed saying, you know, I give permission for my child to be under the care of this particular adult, and that adult is there and not arrested themselves, which is other questions, but they're not arrested themselves, and that that might be a way to protect. But outside of that, it really depends on the jurisdiction. And it also, unfortunately, depends on the police, right? Like the police ultimately have so much power in these situations that they get to determine how folks move.
Yeah, it's all arbitrary. It's based on how they wake up and feel that day sometimes, which is really sad. I saw a question in the chat where someone wanted to know if they said that they heard writing the jail number on you would cause the police to increase your bail. I still don't think that's reason enough to not do it. I've never heard of that happening, but you're not going to remember that number and you're going to be under distress. So write it down. Always write
the number down a bunch of different places on you, so that if it wipes off on your arm, you have it on your leg, or you have it on your shirt or anything. And the thing is that police, they don't care about us. They do not. They're not. Their job is. I almost went there. They don't care about us, right? And so because they don't care about you, they're not going to do anything to protect you, right? And so if they see the jail support number, it's not going to make them more or less helpful, right? They're just going to be like, they're still going to try to harm you at the end of the day. As legal observers, like we see some like more and more, and even like watch what's happening. Like police are now getting to the point where they're so angry that they're like harming not only protesters and objective observers, but also like journalists, right? Like parents with children, like women and femme identified people, like they're literally with reckless abandon, like just hurting people and harming people. So they don't care about you. So you have to protect yourself. You have to protect yourself. That's why it's important that you don't go out there without knowing the jail support number. And somebody asked in the chat about the DC number. It's 202-888-1731. Why do I know it?
No.
I know it because like I need to call it if I need to call it, but also I'm the person who answers the phone sometimes in the middle of the night. So I'll be on jail support. So if you're in DC and you get arrested, it may be me that you're talking to. So yeah, no, protect yourself.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I have anything else to add.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I saw another question. Sorry, just trying to make sure I get everyone's questions. How can white people show further solidarity when arrested? Like during protests, white folks should put their body between people of color and police. So what is like the version of that when arrested or in jail?
So what white people can do to show solidarity is they can speak up in those situations, right? If you see some injustice happening, you're all being kettled. Like a kettle is where the police have used police lines and they've blocked everybody in and no one can go anywhere. And you see police officers being particularly harmful to, like, you know, a specific group of people. You can use your voice, you can use your bodies, you can speak up. Now recognize that that doesn't mean that you're going to be any safer because you're putting yourself in harm's way, but that's what it literally will take in order to get their attention, because police officers literally respond to white bodies and white voices and white cries in different ways than they do the bodies of Black and trans and queer and other to them, right? Otherness to them. And so at a lot of protests, a lot of times that's why you will see like Surge, which is a white-led group, standing up for racial justice, or showing up. They do both. They stand up and they show up for racial justice. They'll oftentimes like put their bodies out in front of Black people because they know that police are not going to advance on them in the same way they will if there's a group of Black people holding a line or holding space. So what we need you to do is to move from your comfortable space of allyship into accomplishship, and like become the accomplice who puts their body on the line. Like, your money is fine and we appreciate it. Thank you very much for every Cash App and every Venmo that has come through, for sure. But I need you to get out there in the streets and stop depending on people like Breya and myself and Kenjo to be out here doing the hard labor of not only training folks and teaching folks, but then turning around and getting in the streets and doing it too, because there's not enough of us. Like, we need y'all to step up. That's what you can do. Become an accomplice for the movement, put your body on the line, talk to your problematic family members during holidays, don't ignore things, cut them off when they don't treat people right, like call the shit out, call it out and put your bodies out there. Like, that's what I don't know what else to tell you. I get this question all the time, and I'm just, if I had the answer for what white people could do, I would be a bajillionaire, right? Because I would sell that shit. I would sell that answer so that y'all could know what to do, and it wouldn't be incumbent upon me to inform you. I'm doing the work to read, to learn. I do this every day. This is not just like a passion project. This is my praxis. This is how I live my life. Like, I do all of these things in real life. So I don't know, like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like go off like that, but like, also I'm not sorry for that, because like, shit, it's hard. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So anyways, I'm sorry, Breya, what do you think?
I agree 100%. I would say for our most vulnerable people, I'm thinking more people with like extreme medical needs who may get arrested. You could be the first and foremost agitators to getting them what they need and to going up there to trying to get them released as soon as possible, because like Ria said, they're going to respond to you and your body way differently than they would respond to mine. So like, if I knew one of my comrades was diabetic and needed to get out sooner, I'm gonna send the white professional woman to do the first shift of jail support before I send myself. Okay. Because I know that that's going to work before it works with me. So
right. And oftentimes, like that's the other thing is, like, literally when we say use your body, we're not being figurative. We literally mean use your body. Like, when I'm organizing legal observers, a lot of time legal observers are white people. If we need to have a police liaison, I want it to be a white, tall, man, right? Because cisgendered men, because I know that the way that the police are going to interact with that white, tall, cisgendered men is going to be different from the way that they interact with me, my queer, Black, like probably righteously angry self, right? And like, so I know that. And since I know that, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. Like Ria said, get out there first. Don't look to us to tell you what to do. You see, you know it's wrong. You see it's wrong. That's why you feel the way you do. That's why the blood rushes to your face. And so when you feel that feeling, don't wait on me to ask you for help. Just do it. Don't wait on somebody to tell you what to do. Do the right thing.
Yeah, and I would also say, don't bother if you being helpful is contingent upon somebody's 100% innocence.
Yes.
Because what does that even mean for Black people? What does that even mean? The way we are vulnerable, the way we are criminalized, and the way we actually have to survive, we don't have no use for the purity politics. So if that's why you're there, if you only there to get the innocent, respectable Black people out of jail, they ain't do nothing. They go to GW, get them. That's a college educated. No, you could just stay at home. We don't need you. We don't need you at all. You know, if that's the only way that you will show up in community with us, I'ma just go by myself. If that's what it's about.
Come on now.
When you understand that we are operating in the criminal punishment system, that affinity you have for innocence will be lost, and you can work on that. So I'm gonna encourage you to dive into some abolitionist literature. Our girl Ruth Angela Davis, get into the girls' works, and yeah, that's what you can really do, because a part of you being in this fight is you got to really lose your affinity for what you consider the justice system, because we consider it the punishment system.
Thank you both so much. This training has been amazing, and I really appreciate both of you taking the time to share your knowledge with people, and give people like tangible skills they need to show up and protest in their communities. Before we wrap up, do either of you like have any like last remarks or like things you want to leave the group with?
I feel like I've gone off a lot, so I'll just say this. In DC, which is the community that I organize and I live and work in, we are having, as you know, there's going to be tons of protests this weekend. So if you're in DC and you would like to be trained to become a legal observer, I'm leading a training tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Get in there, because we need to staff these streets 24 hours a day for the next 3 or 4 days. And then after that, because the protests aren't going to stop after it stops being Juneteenth weekend, right? So we need bodies, we need commitment, and we need your time. So hit me up. You have my information, and get involved.
Yeah, just to echo that, we have a lot planned for this weekend and just this month. So if you want to start getting involved, now is the time. For me personally, I am an educator. I'm always down to do teach-ins and talks reasonably. So that's the role that I play. And I put my contact information in the chat, and I'll just leave you all with, it's a principled struggle. We're going to be doing this for a very long time, and that's just all I got. But thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. Yes, totally. I agreed with y'all. It's great.
Thank you. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and taking some time this evening to learn, just some tangible tools and tips about what to do if you're arrested or someone you know is arrested. I just want to remind folks that tomorrow we have another training. This one will be with Noor of DC Action Lab, and it will be more about how to plan a protest or direct action yourself. It'll be at 6 p.m. and you can sign up for the training at bit.ly/direct-action-101-training. And I know that's also been posted in the chat a couple times. I just also want to say, if you're young and you're an activist and you are listening to this, if you're between the age of 14 and 24, Advocates for Youth supports organizers and activists all around the country. We are currently, recruiting great organizers for our program. So if you're listening to this and that's you, please apply to one of our programs. You can visit the bit.ly link that's on my screen and that I also know was shared in the chat for more information about our programs and about how we support young organizers and train them. Thank you all for joining. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.